Strobe integration points, taking application performance management to the next level. Before we begin, we'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. All the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner of the slide area. Today's presentation consists of slides and a screen share. For optimal viewing experience, please ensure that you have checked system requirements along with bandwidth considerations. Webinars are bandwidth intensive, so closing unnecessary browser tabs will help conserve your bandwidth. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the help link located via the question mark widget at the bottom left of your screen, where you'll find details about system requirements and frequently asked questions. If you experience a blank screen during the webcast, please try refreshing your browser or pressing F5. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a full answer is needed or if we run out of time, we will reach out directly. Also notice the Learn More widget. Here we've added a newly published blog, How to Elevate Operations Through Holistic APM with Compuware Strobe, a webcast replay using Compuware Strobe to save CPU, 4 real-life cases from the files of CPT Global, as well as a copy of today's slide presentation, which may be of additional interest. We would also like to encourage everyone to fill out our survey before the end of today's presentation, and by submitting your responses, you will automatically be entered to win a $50 American Express gift card. There's going to be 3 lucky winners drawn from today's respondents. We are extremely pleased to have as our speakers today Compuware Account Consultant Jim Young and Solution Consultant Mike Wingfield. We will also be joined by Compuware Product Manager Spencer Hallman, who will assist during our Q&A, so make sure to bring your questions. With that, I'd now like to welcome and hand things over to Jim.
Great. Thank you, Janet. And welcome again, everyone, to this edition of Did You Know webcasts. Strobe integration points, taking APM to the next level. This is Jim Young, and today we are focusing on Strobe and how a technology developed approximately 40 years ago continues to be more relevant than ever before in today's world of mainframe application performance management. We will see how Strobe and iStrobe function in Compuware's Topaz and the Eclipse-based GUI interface that is available for all the Compuware products: FileAid, abend-aid, Expediter, HyperStation, and ISPW. Additionally, we will explore how Compuware's ThruPut Manager and Strobe link together to automatically and intelligently optimize end-to-end batch automation. We will then finish up by looking into Strobe integrations with BMC's CAzE and MainView technologies, iStrobe's DB2 SQL analysis feature with AppDynamics, which is a distributed monitoring tool, and finally the integration of iStrobe measurements from ConicIT, a mainframe predictive analytics tool that uses data from your monitor to do behavioral analysis. So we have much to cover and little time, so let's get started. Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jim. This is Mike Wingfield. Just to give you a brief background on Strobe, mainframe Strobe has been around a long time, and it has very low overhead because it takes samples and it's not a monitor. But it's a tool that enables a deep dive into where an application, whether it's batch, online, DDF, where it's spending its time, what's using CPU, whether it's user code, file access, database access, system-related or LE-related, and what's causing wait, whether it's file-related or database-related or system-related. And iStrobe is a GUI interface for Strobe, and most everything that can be done in Strobe can be done with iStrobe. There are additional features in iStrobe that are not available in Strobe, and that includes the SQL analysis feature, the Strobe Advisor, the rolling 4-hour average reports, Strobe Insight reports, performance tracker. And just to let you know, this presentation will be made available afterwards, and it will include screenshots from the demo portions. So the first integration that we want to talk about is the Topaz Workbench. As Jim mentioned, Topaz is an Eclipse-based GUI interface for the Compuware products like Expediter, FileAid, abend-aid, HyperStation, Topaz for Java Performance, and iStrobe, just to name a few. It has the ability to delve deeply into program structure and analysis, logic and data flows, data relationships. You can do unit testing with Topaz for Total Test, and you can deploy Topaz on Amazon Web Services now. And you can also easily move files between LPARs and edit data with just one editor, regardless of where that data resides. So let's take a look at this at Topaz. I'll bring Topaz up here. And the way you configure Topaz to identify iStrobe is you go to the Windows tab and down to Preferences, and then you can expand on Compuware and down here to iStrobe, and you can see that I already have some iStrobe URLs put in there. So once you've got that configured, you can go up here to Compuware, and you can see all of the tools that are installed, and then go over to iStrobe, pick one of these iStrobes, and it comes up in this lower right pane. Now I can expand that, maximize it, so you can see the iStrobe main menu. And we'll talk a little bit more and show you some more about that main menu a little later. So back to our presentation. Now the next integration we want to talk about here is ThruPut Manager. And again, as Jim mentioned, it automatically and intelligently optimizes batch system loading, throughput, balancing across members of JESPLEX, and lowers the peak rolling 4-hour average that's used in software billing. But it ensures that the most important workloads are completed first, which is a big benefit if you have service level agreements. And I believe in one of our next releases, there will be a GUI interface available for ThruPut Manager. But for now, it's ISPF. So we take a look at this process, and what a user can do is add a /*strobe Jekyll card. It's a job execution card into the JCL. You submit that job, and then ThruPut Manager identifies that card and will submit a strobe measurement request just prior to execution. The job step executes, the strobe measures it, and automatically creates the iStrobe profile, and then you'll receive an email link with a link to the iStrobe profile. So this is just an example of what that card would look like in your JCL. And this is an example of what the email that you would get. Now the lower link here puts you into the measurement session data, which is kind of a normal place, but there's also another link in here for the Strobe Advisor. And you can get to any of these reports once you get into the profile, but Strobe Advisor is a good place to start. It identifies the top 5 CPU users in the measurement, the top 5 causes of wait, the top 5 files based on EXEP count. It'll show you the LE parameters that are being used, the top 5 transactions if this was an online measurement, and the top 10 SQL statements if there's DB2 access. So now this is what that Jekyll card looks like. And all these parameters are positional, and some are optional, like the step name and the program name. You can have one or the other, but you don't necessarily need both. And you can use the star all in the step name if you wanted to measure all the steps of a job. The duration is in minutes. If you didn't happen to put anything in there, the default you get out of the Strobe ParmLab, it's usually set to 1 minute. The samples, and these are the number of samples that would be taken. The maximum that you can do is 150,000 samples. The default is 10,000, and 10,000 is generally a pretty good number. Another parm lib will indicate how the profile gets named. And then the email address, you can have up to 70 characters in that. And certainly you want to use that because that'll send that email to you with the links into that profile. And this works with any supported Strobe versions. So now the next couple of integrations that we want to take a look at here are our BMC integrations. Now, the first one we'll look at is the BMC's cost analyzer for Z Enterprise. This is historical. This is using SMF data. And CAzE provides a lot of insightful reports, MLC budget forecasting, impact modeling, and it's to help save on that monthly license charges, and identifies capacity peaks through analysis of SMF data, and it deals with that rolling 4-hour average. And there's a lot of interactive graphs and dashboards. Now, we don't have CAzE installed, so I'll just be showing you some slides on this one. Now, once you've logged into CAzE, you set up the iStrobe URL in the CAzE configuration, and then you select what BMC calls a contract, and then you select an output type. And once you get to the next screen, then you select a particular billing month that you want to take a look at. Select that billing month, and then you want to select an MLC product. In our particular case, we are selecting the ZOS product. We click on that, and then this doesn't show up real well, but in that lower left quadrant is a link to the workload by suites. You click on that workload by suites, and it will bring up several LPARs that are on that particular suite. In our particular case, we would hover over the CW01 LPAR and click on that. And then the next screen actually shows us our peak rolling 4-hour average. And one of the options that we have there is to launch iStrobe. You click on that, and then you get a little panel that comes up here, and you can select yes. Now, you may get a window that says, you know, please allow pop-ups, so you want to click on that. And then the next thing, you'll have to log into the iStrobe. And once you've logged into iStrobe through the host communication interface, it's going to bring up a pie chart. Now, this pie chart, you have the ability to look at started tasks, JES, the batch jobs, and it'll give you a list of the top 50. So right here, I'm going to actually show you the rolling 4-hour average in iStrobe. So let me pull up iStrobe. And what you'll see here then is the main menu for iStrobe. And the rolling 4-hour average is one of our 60-some canned insight reports. But because so many people use this, we actually put it on the main menu. So we would select that rolling 4-hour average, and then we're going to go and bring up the monthly rolling 4-hour average. And let me just select a few more months here just so you can see rerun this. And you can see that we have 10 months of data here. Now I'm going to pick on October, and I'll pick on our larger LPAR, and we'll start to drill down into that. Drill down into that particular month, and now we can see all the days of that month, and let's pick the highest day of that month. We'll drill down into that, and then we see the 24 hours in that day, and we could pick on one of those hours, and now we get a layout of the actual rolling 4-hour average. Let's pick one of those rolling 4-hour average and drill down into it, and now you'll see that same pie chart that we had coming out of CAzE into iStrobe. So we can then pick JES. We'll show the batch jobs, and we get a report here of the top 50 in descending orders. Now, if we wanted to then take a measurement of that particular job that was the top one, we would log into the mainframe, and that should bring up our measurement panel. Now it's populated that job in the job field, and we would set up how long do we want to take this measurement, how many samples. This was a batch job, so chances are it's not running now, so we would set the measure later so that when that job kicks off, Strobe takes a measurement. And then we set up, once that measurement is complete, we want to then create the iStrobe profile, so we would give it a name. We can put tags in there like an application name or a username. It just makes it easier when you're filtering through a bunch of profiles when you get into iStrobe. Then you put your notification email so that you'll get that email with the links in it. And then in the lower right, you can't quite see it, there's a submit button. We would submit this, and then when that job kicks off, we would take that measurement. So now let's go back and we'll take a look at the other BMC product. And that product is the MainView. So we're going to do a demo of the MainView Explorer. So one of the first things that we do is we want to configure where that MainView Explorer is, because this is a GUI interface. Explorer, it gives you the ability to access all the MainView products, and there's a lot of performance-related dashboards and graphs. But we set up where that server is and what the port number is, and then we log into MainView Explorer. So now, let me bring up MainView. So now what you see here is when we first come into the MainView Explorer, we would double-click on this, on our CW01, which is our LPAR that we're taking a look at, and we would get a dashboard, and I'll just do a slight refresh on that. And then once we've gotten into the LPAR, then all of the products will go down here to the job account and expand on that, and then we're going to choose the JCPU option, which is the interval job CPU utilization, and that shows you everything that's running out there on that LPAR. Let me just do a refresh on that. So then when you're first setting this up so that it can interface with iStrobe, we'll do a right-click on one of these headers, and we want to edit the hyperlink. I've already put the URL in there, but the URL also contains a symbolic that allows you to identify the job you were wanting to measure and also the system that it was on. So then I can do a right-click next to the job that I'm interested in, go down to hyperlinks, and there's that link into iStrobe. And now I can log into this. And then that will bring up that measurement panel again. Now in this particular case, you can see that it populated that job that we were interested in. And this is something that's out there running, so we wouldn't set the measure later option. We would just determine how long do we want to take this measurement, how many samples do we take, and again, we would also want to populate the profile settings, put any tags in there that we wanted, our email address for notification. If there was DB2 in this, we would set the SQL analysis feature, and we'll talk a little more about that later on. So now, back to our presentation. And just to give you, there are some other integrations besides the two that we just showed you here. There's also the ability to set alarms and have automatically kick off a strobe measurement through an API when an alarm is triggered in MainView. And there's also an integration with the MainView loop check feature. And so to detect when a program is looping, which can happen a lot in test environments. But it still chews up CPU. So when it is detected, a strobe measurement is started automatically through an API for a few minutes while they attempt to contact the programmer. or they just cancel the job. But there's a strobe measurement that that programmer then can look at to determine what was going on with that program. So the next integration we'll take a look at is Cisco's AppDynamics. Now we're in the process of actually moving our installation of AppDynamics to another server, so I'll just be able to show you some of the screenshots here. But AppDynamics is a distributed monitoring tool, and it's for customer-facing webs and mobile apps. And when those mobile apps are accessing the mainframe, and particularly in mainframe DB2 data, all that AppDynamics can tell them is it went into DDF, JDBC, and it came back out. They can just show them some elapsed times. So with this integration, and this is where Istroke comes in, we can then, since AppDynamics captures this SQL, they can use what's called the request SQL analysis feature on demand to actually get information about that SQL statement. It can get the access path that DB2 chose, and it can get information about the DB2 catalog. So you have all the things you need to do performance and tuning on that SQL statement. And it's just right-clicking on the SQL, and then you can bring up the request SQL analysis feature on demand. So to set that up in AppDynamics, you would log into AppDynamics, and then in the upper right there's a little gear icon that you click on, and then you would select administration. And then the panel that comes up, you would set that URL for Istroke into there, save it, and then check to make sure that that Istrobe has been configured. And then we want to go to Applications. And then once we're in the Applications, we want to click on Istrobe. And that's going to bring up some information. We can now start to look at the transactions that AppDynamics has been capturing. We would click on Transaction Snapshots. And then once there, we can choose one of these transactions and double click on it. That'll bring up another panel here. And if you see this little database icon that's in the middle, then you know that it's gone into mainframe DB2 data. And so there'll be something that we can drill down into. So we drill down into that. And then over here on the left, we would want to take a look at the SQL calls. And that'll bring up a list of SQL calls. You select one of those SQL calls, then do a right click on it, and it'll say View in Strobe. So we want to view that in Strobe. And what that'll do is it then gives you that ability to log into the mainframe through Istrobe. And then when we hit the test the SQL statement, we would come back with the access path in the explain. We get DB2 catalog information and a formatted SQL. So now I can't show you that in AppDynamics, but I can show you that in Istrobe. So let me choose one of our measurements that we've taken. And what you'll see on the screen here in a second is we have taken a strobe measurement of a DDF address space. And we intentionally did not select the SQL analysis feature so that we would get this little request SQLAF on demand. If we had chosen to get this into the iStrobe profile, this link would just say SQLAF. And if we clicked on it, it would bring up the SQL analysis feature window. So that's what we want to try and do here. We want to do this on demand just like we would do through AppDynamics. So we click on this SQLAF on demand. It brings up that panel where we can log into the mainframe. And I'm using my user ID because I have a plan table out on this system. So I can then look at this SQL statement and get a dynamic explain on it. So I click on, so maybe I use the wrong password. There we go. So now what we see here is the explain, and we can see based on the access type of R stands for relational, but what it means is I'm doing a table space scan. And we can see what is the size of that table. We can see there were 43,000 rows in that table. And here is the formatted SQL. And what you'll notice is it's using some functions in here. And that's what's causing this to be a table space scan. But we have the ability to do some what ifs, and we can actually change that SQL. This little green arrow up in the upper right will let me redo this. Only this time, what I'm going to do is actually change the SQL just a little bit here. And I'm going to get rid of some of these functions. Let's see if I can change this access path. Okay, so I've pulled out some of those functions there. And now I want to test that again. So now what it's going to bring up is we can see, excuse me, I'm now using an index and I'm matching on the first column of that index. So this particular SQL statement is going to run a lot faster because we could play around with that and do some what ifs. So let's go back to the presentation. And our last integration that we want to talk about is ConicIT. Now, ConicIT, we don't have ConicIT installed yet, but it's a mainframe predictive analytics tool that uses data from your monitor. And it does some behavioral analysis to determine when an application is running outside its normal bounds. So we want to do some kind of action when this happens. And ConicIT does a lot of self-learning. It can set dynamic thresholds, and it can determine when something is running outside where it normally is expected to run. And you know, it's smart enough to know when something is really an alert and when something is just a brief anomaly. But when that happens, you have the ability to determine what is it that we want to do when this happens. We just want to notify somebody, but in our particular case, what it's going to do, it's actually going to kick off a strobe measurement, and it's going to do that through an API. And what that'll allow them to do is to then take a measurement, create the iStrobe profile, so that they can then drill down into that program that's running to determine what's causing it to use a lot of CPU. So it's really kind of handy because it gives the operations a chance to interface back into development there. They can open a JIRA and point it to that iStrobe profile so that they can maybe make a fix in Topaz and get that fix out into production. So not only is this a good tool for application performance management, but it's also a good tool for DevOps. So just to let, if anyone would like a less hurried demo of these integrations, please contact us. In ConicIT, this is pretty easy to install. It's on a Linux server. It's not using any MIPS because it's using data from your monitor. It's self-learning. It's got a lot of dynamic thresholds, and it's fully customizable. So, Jim, let me turn this back over to you to summarize what we've talked about today.
Jim, are you on mute?
Yeah, thank you, Janet. Thank you, Mike. And just in the interest of time, let me just briefly summarize what we've looked at today, and before we turn it over to answer the questions. So we were able to focus in a traditional sense in what Strobe has always done by looking at how applications are performing on the mainframe. But additionally, what we've been able to see today is that we've extended the use of Strobe to also look at performance of your that's depicted in your monitors on the system side of your environment by using CAzE and the BMC MainView and ConicIT. And certainly by looking at overall batch performance and rolling 4-hour average by integrating Compuware Strobe with ThruPut Manager. So that, with that, we want to entertain questions. So, Janet, if you want to advance it to
Yep. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Mike.
Questions?
Absolutely. Before we get to the Q&A, I'd just like to take a moment to remind everybody to please encourage you to fill out the survey. It does help us help you as customers perfect our products that in the long term. And again, if you submit, you'll be eligible to be one of 3 lucky winners that will win a $50 American Express gift card. And with that, we're going to turn it over to the team, including Spencer Hallman, the product manager, for Q&A.
Thanks, Janet. Okay, our first question. Many DB2 financial institutions have hundreds to thousands of remote access, DRDA, DDF, online transactions. Have you suggested to customers that converting their COBOL stored procedure to native stored procedures could result in CPU and possibly MSU savings? Do you have any thoughts around that, Mike?
Well, you know, certainly the native store procedures, they have the advantage because they are running in the DBM1 address space. And certainly the COBOL store procedures also run very well in D. So either one of those is really a good option. But I don't know that we have any particular. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the huge advantages of the native store procedure is that it can run on a zip, whereas a 3GL store procedure can't run on a zip. So you can see potentially if you convert over a lot of them, I think you could see a potential MSU savings.
Yeah, I agree.
When you're rolling 4 hours.
It's probably worth exploring.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. So is the next question, is the SQL or SQL analysis on demand feature an API into Strobe that others can call? I think I can handle this one, Mike. Yes, when we did build that feature, that on-demand feature, it was built as an API, and actually AppDynamics is calling that. And it is documented in our manuals how to call that API. So if there's other products out there or you want to call it yourself, in the manuals themselves there's a section on the different APIs to call and how to call them. We have another question. Again, this is around integrations. Of course, the whole presentation is on integration. Is there an integration with a Megamon? And actually, you can utilize any of the APIs. The SQL analysis on demand, and we also have a measurement API as well that can be called to automatically kick off a measurement. And so you can build that into a Megamon. And I believe there's an IBM manual out there. I looked into it once that tells you how to do that. And you can see, and I think even in the Strobe documentation, we document how to do that as well. Okay. What is the overhead of running Strobe on a batch job? You want to take that one, Mike?
Sure. Well, as we mentioned earlier, Strobe uses a sampling technique that stores performance data in a Strobe sample data set. So the overhead is very small because it's not a monitor, so it's not out there all the time. It's only out there when you're actually measuring the job.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Okay, I think we're just about at the end of our presentation. If you've asked a question and we haven't answered it, we will get back to you individually with that question. Janet, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Mike. That was a great presentation. And again, like Spencer said, we will definitely get back with you with unanswered questions that we did not have time to answer. And again, please fill out the survey, and we thank you for attending today's webcast, and we look forward to seeing you in our next webcast series coming in December. Have a great day, everyone.